The dog stops first, and 70-year-old Evelyn Carter knows at once that something on Black Ridge has been waiting longer than she has. The abandoned cabin stands less than 30 feet ahead, crooked against the pale Colorado sky, its weathered boards silvered by decades of snow, wind, and mountain sun. Behind it, the earth falls sharply toward a valley washed in late afternoon gold. Evelyn plants one hiking pole beside her boot and draws a careful breath. At 70, she has learned that mountains do not care about pride. The final mile has taken nearly 2 hours, and every step has reminded her that determination and youth are not the same thing. Still, she made it. Beside her, Ranger has not. The 7-year-old German Shepherd stands perfectly still on the narrow trail, his black and tan coat stirring beneath the cold wind. His ears are forward. His amber eyes are fixed on the cabin. Evelyn looks back at him. "Well, don't tell me you're tired now." Usually, Ranger answers her voice with a tail sweep, a tilted head, some small acknowledgement that says he is listening. This time, nothing. Evelyn gives the leash a gentle pull. "Come on, boy." Ranger lowers his weight against it. Not frightened, not resisting her. Watching, Evelyn follows his stare toward the porch. The cabin looks exactly as abandoned as the county record said it was. One window is cracked. Pine needles have gathered against the steps. A rusted lantern hangs beside the door, rocking faintly in the wind. There is no truck, no smoke, no fresh footprint in the dirt. Only the smell of pine, cold stone, and old timber drying beneath the mountain sun. Evelyn takes one step forward. Ranger does not move. Ranger, his breathing changes. Slow, focused. Evelyn has seen that look before when he catches a scent beneath fresh snow or hears a deer moving beyond the tree line. But his eyes are no longer on the door. They are lower now, beneath the porch. Evelyn turns toward the shadow under the cabin, where the structure rests on old stone supports above a narrow strip of dark earth. Nothing moves there. She listens. Wind slides through the pines. Somewhere far below, a hawk calls across the valley. The loose lantern taps softly against the wall. Evelyn almost smiles at herself. 70 years old, standing on a mountain because of a map her husband left behind, and now letting a dog convince her that an empty cabin is hiding ghosts. "Daniel," she whispers, "you'd better have had a good reason." Ranger suddenly takes one step backward. Then comes a sound from beneath the floorboards. Small, metallic, clear enough to make Evelyn's hand tighten around the leash. Clink. The wind falls quiet. Ranger's ears rise higher. Evelyn stares into the darkness beneath the porch. The cabin has been abandoned for decades. No one is supposed to be here. Then the sound comes again. Clink. And Ranger sits down, refusing to take another step. 8 months earlier, Evelyn could not bring herself to open Daniel Carter's old field box. It sat beneath the bedroom window in their home outside Colorado Springs, exactly where he had left it, its brass latch dulled by years of fingerprints and dust. Daniel had been gone since winter, and grief had turned ordinary objects into borders Evelyn was afraid to cross. His coffee mug remained beside the sink for weeks. His olive green jacket stayed on the hook near the garage. Some mornings she still woke expecting to hear his boots crossing the kitchen floor, followed by Ranger's nails clicking behind him. Daniel had been a United States Marine long before Evelyn met him, and although he rarely spoke about those years, he carried them quietly into everything he did. He folded blankets with impossible precision. He checked doors twice before bed. He never left home without telling Ranger when he would return. In 42 years of marriage, Evelyn learned not to push against the rooms inside Daniel that he kept locked. Then, 3 days after what would have been their anniversary, Ranger changed that. Evelyn found him sitting beside Daniel's jacket before sunrise, staring at the pocket. "What is it, boy?" Ranger touched the fabric with his nose. Something inside made a dry paper sound. Evelyn reached into the pocket and pulled out a folded topographic map of Black Ridge. A circle had been drawn around a remote cabin nearly 6 miles from the nearest paved road. She recognized Daniel's handwriting immediately. Beneath the map was a small photograph. Daniel stood beneath a summer sky, perhaps 30 years old, his Marine uniform neat, his face younger than Evelyn remembered ever seeing it. Behind him rose the same mountain ridge she had passed countless times without knowing it mattered. On the back, written in faded blue ink, were 9 words. "When you are ready, take Ranger to Black Ridge." Evelyn read the sentence twice. Then a third time. Daniel had never mentioned a cabin there. He had never explained why Black Ridge mattered. For 8 months, the map remained inside the field box beside his worn dog tags, because Evelyn was not ready, and she suspected Daniel had known she would not be. Until that morning. She woke before dawn, made coffee, packed water and sandwiches, and placed Daniel's dog tags around her neck. Ranger was already waiting by the front door. Now, high above the valley with the abandoned cabin before them, Evelyn touches those same tags beneath her jacket. The metal is warm from her skin. Ranger remains seated at the edge of the porch, watching the darkness below the floorboards. Evelyn looks at him, then at the cabin Daniel somehow knew they would find together. For the first time since his death, she understands something that frightens her more than the strange metallic sound. Daniel had not left her directions to a place. He had left Ranger a job. Evelyn waits until the mountain wind settles before moving again. Ranger remains beside the porch, alert but calm, his amber eyes fixed on the darkness beneath the cabin. Whatever Daniel expected the dog to do, Evelyn knows forcing him forward will reveal nothing. She loosens the leash instead. "All right, boy, show me." Ranger rises, but rather than returning to the shadow below the floorboards, he walks slowly toward the porch steps. He pauses at the first weathered plank, sniffs once, then climbs. Evelyn follows carefully, testing each board beneath her hiking boots before trusting her weight to it. The cabin door stands slightly open. When she pushes it, the old hinges answer with a tired groan. Cool air brushes her face. Inside, sunlight enters through the cracked window in thin golden shafts, catching dust that drifts through the room like snow too light to fall. The place smells of dry pine, old iron, and something faintly familiar that Evelyn cannot name. There is almost nothing left. A small wood stove rests against one wall. 2 shelves sag above a narrow table. A faded enamel cup sits upside down near the window, and beside it lies a lantern coated in dust. No treasure. No explanation. No obvious reason Daniel would send her 6 miles into the mountains at 70 years old. Ranger steps inside and begins sniffing the floor, moving with quiet purpose. Evelyn watches him while her hand closes around Daniel's dog tags beneath her jacket. "You knew this place, did you?" Ranger crosses the room without looking back. He passes the stove, passes the table, then stops beside an old iron bed pushed against the far wall. The mattress disappeared long ago, leaving only rusted springs and a wooden board beneath the frame. Ranger sits. Evelyn's breath catches. "What now?" The dog looks at her, then lowers his nose toward the bed rail. Evelyn approaches. Her knees ache from the climb, and she braces one hand against the wall before crouching. At first, she sees only scratches in the darkened wood. Then sunlight shifts through the broken window, and 2 letters emerge beneath years of dust. D.C. Evelyn does not breathe for a moment. She reaches out and traces the carving with one finger. The grooves are old, softened by time, but she knows those initials as surely as she knows her own. Daniel Carter. A memory rises without warning. Daniel at their kitchen table years ago, carving her name into the back of a wooden picture frame because he claimed store-bought gifts needed something human in them. The same slightly crooked curve, the same deep final stroke. Evelyn lowers herself onto the edge of the bare frame. "You were here," she whispers. Ranger rests his chin against her knee. Outside, wind moves through the high pines, carrying the clean scent of cold stone through the cracked window. Evelyn looks around again, and suddenly the cabin feels different. Not abandoned. Remembered. Daniel had stood in this room. He had touched this bed. He had carried this place through more than 40 years of marriage without once giving it a name. Then Ranger lifts his head. His ears turn toward the floor. Beneath them comes the faint metallic sound again. Clink. This time Ranger does not hesitate. He rises, walks straight to the doorway, and looks back at Evelyn as though the initials were never what he brought her here to find. Ranger crosses the porch before Evelyn can rise fully from the bed frame, and by the time she reaches the doorway, he is already circling toward the narrow space beneath the cabin. The afternoon light has begun to soften over Black Ridge, turning the distant valley copper and gold, but the air near the cliff carries a colder edge now. Evelyn steps down carefully and follows him around the porch. "Easy, Ranger." The German shepherd lowers his nose to the ground. He moves past the first stone support, then stops beneath the corner of the cabin where dry pine needles have collected against exposed roots. He sniffs once, twice, then his front paws strike the earth. Dirt scatters behind him. Evelyn watches for several seconds before concern replaces curiosity. Ranger, stop. He keeps digging. His movements are controlled but urgent, as though whatever lies beneath that soil has become the only thing in the world that matters. Evelyn takes his collar gently and draws him back. Not so close to the edge. The ground falls away less than 12 feet beyond them, and decades of mountain weather have loosened the soil around the cabin. Ranger waits only until she releases him. Then he returns to the same spot. His paw scrapes across something that answers with a faint metallic note. Clink. Evelyn kneels slowly. There you are. She brushes aside loose soil with her gloved hand and finds a narrow steel cable disappearing beneath a thick root. It is dark with age but unmistakably deliberate. Not discarded wire. Not part of the cabin. Someone put it there. Ranger noses the cable, then looks at Evelyn. She follows it beneath the root, clearing dirt a few inches at a time until her fingers touch a hard corner. Her pulse quickens. She reaches into her backpack, takes out the small folding trowel she brought for the trail, and works carefully around the object. The mountain seems to grow quieter with every inch of earth she removes. At last, a rectangular steel box emerges from beneath the cabin, no larger than an old ammunition case, its surface mottled with rust and packed with dry soil. The cable is looped through its handle. Evelyn sits back on her heels. Ranger stands beside her, breathing softly. Daniel, she murmurs. There is no question now. Her husband knew this cabin. He knew this hiding place. And somehow, he expected Ranger to find it. Evelyn grips the handle with both hands and pulls. The box resists at first, held by roots and years, then slides free with a low scrape across the earth. Ranger immediately stops digging. He simply sits beside her, his task apparently complete. Evelyn studies the old latch. Her hands begin to tremble, not from the cold. For 8 months, she has wished for one more conversation with Daniel, one more ordinary morning, one more answer to questions she never knew she should ask. Now an answer rests beneath her palms, carried across decades and hidden under a forgotten cabin high above Colorado. She opens the latch. Inside, wrapped carefully in faded canvas, lies a bundle of letters, 2 weathered dog tags, an old photograph, and a worn leather dog collar. Evelyn reaches for the photograph first. 2 young Marines stand shoulder to shoulder beneath a bright mountain sky. One is Daniel. Beside him is a man Evelyn has never seen. Sitting between them is a German shepherd. Evelyn turns the collar until its tarnished brass plate catches the light. One word is engraved there. Ranger. Evelyn stares at the brass plate until the letters blur behind a sudden brightness in her eyes. Ranger. Her Ranger stands inches away, alive and warm beneath the Colorado sun, while the same name rests on a collar that has been buried beneath this cabin for decades. She runs her thumb across the worn leather. It is too small and too old to belong to the dog beside her. Daniel, what were you trying to tell me? Ranger lowers himself near the steel box, his head resting across his front paws. Evelyn unfolds the first letter. The paper has yellowed along the edges, and Daniel's handwriting is younger, sharper, less patient than the notes he used to leave beside her morning coffee. The letter is dated more than 40 years earlier. A name appears in the first line. Thomas Reed. Evelyn glances at the photograph again. The Marine beside Daniel is fair-haired, lean, and smiling beneath the mountain sun, one hand resting on the German shepherd between them. She reads slowly. Daniel writes of training days, long drives through Colorado, terrible coffee, and a friend who could make him laugh when he had forgotten how. Thomas was not simply another Marine. He was the man Daniel trusted when trust mattered most. The letters reveal a story Evelyn has never heard. During a difficult training exercise years before Daniel met her, an accident left several Marines stranded overnight in rough mountain country. Thomas helped Daniel reach safety and stayed behind to guide others toward the trail. Daniel returned home. Thomas did not. The words contain no dramatic explanation, only the quiet weight Daniel carried afterward. He writes that some debts cannot be repaid because the person who gave you everything never asked for anything back. Evelyn lowers the page. Suddenly, she remembers the nights Daniel would wake before dawn and sit alone on the back porch with Ranger beside him. She had always believed he simply missed the Marines. Now she understands there was a name inside those silences. Thomas. She opens another letter. Daniel describes returning to this cabin once each year, sometimes alone, sometimes with an aging German shepherd that had belonged to Thomas. The dog's name was Ranger. After Thomas was gone, Daniel cared for him until old age took him gently years later. Evelyn looks at her own Ranger. He named you after him. The dog lifts his head at the sound of his name. Evelyn presses her lips together, remembering the afternoon 7 years earlier when Daniel came home carrying a German shepherd puppy with oversized paws and bright amber eyes. She had laughed when he announced the name without discussion. Ranger. She never asked why. Beneath the letters lies another dog tag. Evelyn turns it over. Thomas Reed. The metal catches a thin stripe of sunlight. Daniel had kept it all these years. Not as a monument to sorrow, Evelyn realizes, but as a promise not to forget the life that allowed his own to continue. Then she notices one final envelope beneath the collar. Unlike the others, its paper is clean. Recent. Daniel's older handwriting crosses the front. Evelyn expects to see her name. She does not. Written carefully across the envelope is a single word. Ranger. The German shepherd rises before she touches it. His ears lift. His tail gives one slow sweep against the earth. Evelyn looks from the envelope to the dog, and the cold mountain air seems to leave her lungs. Daniel had not merely hoped Ranger would bring her here. He had prepared him for it. Evelyn holds the envelope for several seconds before opening it. Daniel had written Ranger's name with the same steady hand he used on birthday cards, grocery lists, and the small notes he tucked into her suitcase whenever she traveled without him. The sight of it hurts in a quieter way than grief usually does. Ranger steps closer and touches his nose to the envelope. This one is yours, Evelyn whispers. Inside is a single sheet of paper and a narrow strip of faded canvas. The moment the canvas clears the envelope, Ranger becomes still. His nose lifts. He knows the scent. Evelyn watches him, then looks down at Daniel's words. The letter explains what Daniel never had time to say aloud. Months before his health began to fail, he returned to Black Ridge alone. He brought the old collar from the first Ranger and wrapped it in the same canvas he had used during simple scent exercises with their dog at home. He taught Ranger to recognize it. Not all at once. Not like a trick. Daniel would hide the cloth around their property, then quietly send Ranger searching. Behind the shed, beneath the porch steps, near the old pine at the edge of the yard. Evelyn remembers those afternoons now. She had watched through the kitchen window, smiling at what she assumed was an aging Marine inventing games for a dog he loved. But Daniel had been building a path. The map in his jacket. The scent beneath the cabin. The box. Each piece waited for the day Evelyn could bear to follow. She continues reading. Daniel writes that he knows her too well to believe she will come here for herself. She will tell herself she is too old for the climb. She will say the weather might change. She will find 20 sensible reasons to stay home, because staying home means remaining close to everything they shared. So he gives Ranger the responsibility. Evelyn stops reading. A tear slips down her cheek and darkens the paper. Ranger presses his shoulder against her knee. Daniel's final lines are simple. He does not ask her to stop missing him. He does not ask her to move on. He asks only that she keep moving. Thomas once led Daniel home when Daniel could not find the way alone. Years later, Daniel cared for Thomas's Ranger because loyalty, he writes, should never end with the person who started it. Now their Ranger has one last assignment from him. Get Evelyn outside the door. Let her up the mountain. Remind her that love can remain behind without asking the living to remain with it. Evelyn lowers the letter and looks across Black Ridge. For 8 months, she believed grief was the last thing Daniel left her. She was wrong. He left instructions for a dog. He left a trail through the mountains. He left her a reason to put on her boots when staying home felt easier. Ranger nudges her hand, and Evelyn finally laughs through her tears. Mission accomplished, Marine. The German shepherd's tail moves once against the ground. Then his expression changes. His head turns toward the cliff. His ears rise. Evelyn hears nothing at first. Ranger walks toward the edge and stops cold. A moment later, from somewhere far below, a faint human voice rises through the wind. Ranger reaches the edge of the clearing and freezes, his body rigid beneath the fading Colorado light. Evelyn slips Daniel's letter into her jacket and follows, stopping several feet behind him where the ground is firm. Ranger, stay. The German shepherd obeys, but his eyes remain fixed on the slope below. Evelyn listens. Wind moves through the pines. A branch creaks somewhere behind the cabin. Then the sound comes again, so faint she almost mistakes it for a bird carried upward from the valley. Hello. A human voice. Evelyn's heart begins to pound. I hear you, she calls. Where are you? Silence stretches across the cliff. Then, weaker this time, the answer rises. Down here. Ranger gives a low whine and looks at Evelyn. She moves carefully toward a safer overlook, keeping several feet between herself and the drop. About 40 feet below, a narrow shelf of rock cuts across the mountainside. A figure in a blue hiking jacket sits against the stone, one arm raised. I see you, Evelyn calls. Do not try to climb. Stay where you are. The stranger answers that his name is Noah Bennett. He lost the trail near sunset the evening before and slipped onto the lower shelf while trying to find his way back. He has spent the night there, sheltered from the wind, but unable to climb safely in either direction. Evelyn reaches for her phone. One bar appears, vanishes, then returns. She calls emergency services. The connection breaks twice before a dispatcher finally hears enough to understand Black Ridge, abandoned cabin, stranded hiker. Search and rescue is notified, but the dispatcher warns that the terrain will make the approach slow. Evelyn looks toward the trail she climbed that morning. Somewhere lower on the ridge, she might find stronger reception. She could meet rescuers. She could find help faster. Then Noah calls again, and his voice sounds tired. Ma'am, are you still there? Evelyn looks at Ranger. The dog is already lying near the overlook, watching the ledge below. Yes, she says. I am staying right here. The temperature begins dropping with the sun. Evelyn returns to the cabin and finds an old wool blanket folded inside a wooden chest. Dust rises when she shakes it out, but the fabric is dry. Near the wall hangs a coil of weathered utility rope. She does not attempt to rescue herself. Instead, she ties the blanket securely around a bottle of water and a wrapped sandwich from her backpack, then lowers the small bundle slowly toward Noah while Ranger watches every movement. A little left, Noah calls. Evelyn adjusts. Got it. His relief reaches her more clearly than his words. She smiles despite the cold. Daniel always said I packed too much food. Noah asks who Daniel is. Evelyn touches the dog tags beneath her jacket. My husband, she almost says was. The word never comes. Darkness gathers in the valley, and Ranger remains stationed beside the cliff like a sentry who has chosen his post. Every few minutes Evelyn calls down to Noah. Every time, he answers. She talks about ordinary things to keep him alert. Colorado weather. Ranger's terrible habit of stealing socks. Daniel's belief that coffee should be strong enough to frighten a spoon. Noah laughs once, softly, and the sound carries upward through the blue evening. Then a distant light appears between the trees below the ridge. Another follows. Search and rescue. Ranger rises immediately. His ears point toward the approaching voices, and he gives one sharp bark that rolls across the mountain. Evelyn waves her flashlight. Up here. A voice answers from below. Ranger barks again. The rescuers call that they have located the ledge and are moving into position. Evelyn closes her eyes for 1 second, her hand resting on Ranger's back. That morning she climbed Black Ridge believing she was following Daniel into the past. Now, beneath the first stars of evening, she understands why the journey could never end inside an old steel box. Daniel had taught Ranger to lead her here. Ranger had brought her to the cliff. And when another person needed someone to remain, Evelyn Carter had finally remembered what Daniel spent a lifetime showing her. Sometimes the most important thing you can do for another soul is simply refuse to leave. The first rescuers reached the clearing beneath a sky bright with cold stars, their headlamps moving through the pines like small lanterns coming home. Evelyn stands beside Ranger and points them toward the lower ledge. The German shepherd has not left his post. Even when unfamiliar voices fill the quiet and equipment is carried toward the overlook, Ranger remains focused on the place where Noah waits below. Evelyn stays back while the train team works, one hand resting against Ranger's warm shoulder. Time passes differently on a mountain at night. Minutes stretch between voices. Wind moves across the cabin roof. Somewhere below, a rescuer calls Noah's name, and Noah answers. That single reply loosens something inside Evelyn. Eventually, a voice rises from the darkness. We have him. Ranger's body relaxes before Evelyn realizes hers has done the same. Nearly an hour later, Noah Bennett walks into the clearing with two rescuers beside him, wrapped in a thermal blanket and moving carefully, but under his own strength. He looks younger than Evelyn expected, perhaps 30, with tired eyes and a face softened by relief. Ranger approaches first, stopping several feet away. Noah smiles. "So that is the one who found me." Evelyn scratches gently behind Ranger's ear. "He heard you before I did." Noah crouches and holds out his hand. Ranger sniffs it, then presses his nose briefly into Noah's palm. No celebration follows. No one needs one. The mountain is quiet enough to hold the meaning by itself. Before the rescue team prepares to descend, Noah turns to Evelyn. "Can I ask you something?" She nods. "Why were you all the way up here alone?" Evelyn looks toward the cabin. Through the open doorway, Daniel's old steel box rests beneath a stripe of moonlight. The letters are safe inside her backpack now, along with Thomas Reed's dog tag and the faded collar that once belonged to another ranger. 8 months ago, Evelyn would have answered differently. She might have said she was searching for something Daniel left behind. She might have called this climb a final goodbye. Instead, she looks at the dog beside her. "My husband sent me." Noah glances toward the empty cabin, uncertain whether she is joking. Evelyn smiles softly. "He died 8 months ago." Noah's expression changes. "I am sorry." Evelyn looks toward the stars above Black Ridge. "He was a Marine. He planned ahead." Noah laughs quietly, then asks, "Did you find what he wanted you to find?" Evelyn thinks of Daniel's letter, Thomas Reed, the first ranger, and the strange chain of loyalty stretching across more than 40 years to this exact night. "I thought I came here to say goodbye," she says. Ranger leans against her leg. Evelyn places her hand on his head. "Maybe he sent me here to say hello again." The rescuers begin down the trail with Noah between them. Before disappearing into the trees, Noah turns and raises one hand. Evelyn raises hers in return. She does not follow yet. For another moment, she and Ranger stand beside the old cabin while moonlight settles across the porch. Daniel is still gone. Nothing on Black Ridge changes that. But for the first time in 8 months, Evelyn does not feel as though her life ended when his did. Ranger starts toward the trail, then looks back. Evelyn smiles and tightens the straps of her backpack. "All right, boy, take me home." And together, they begin walking down the mountain. By late spring, the cabin on Black Ridge no longer looks forgotten. Evelyn does not restore it into something new. She restores what was worth keeping. The silvered boards remain weathered by mountain winters. Daniel's initials remain carved into the old bed rail. The cracked window is replaced, the roof is repaired, and the porch is strengthened until it can safely hold tired hikers watching evenings settle over the valley. Above the door hangs a small wooden sign with 3 simple words: rest, water, welcome. Inside, Evelyn keeps bottled water, blankets, trail maps, a first aid kit, and a shelf where visitors can leave notes for whoever comes next. There is no monument to Daniel. He would have hated that. There is no plaque explaining Thomas Reed or the promise that survived him. Their story remains where Evelyn believes it belongs, in the letters she carries home and in the life she chooses to live because of them. On one warm afternoon, Ranger lies across the porch boards while sunlight moves through his black and tan coat. At 7 years old, he has learned that Evelyn works slowly, stops often, and always shares the last bite of her sandwich. She has learned that Ranger still checks the space beneath the cabin every time they arrive, as though an old assignment might somehow be waiting there again. Noah Bennett returns that afternoon carrying a new wooden water box for the porch. He has visited 3 times since the rescue. He never arrives empty-handed. Sometimes he brings supplies, sometimes coffee. Once, he brings a photograph taken from the lower trail, showing the cabin against the ridge with Evelyn and Ranger barely visible on the porch. Evelyn places it beside Daniel's old photograph inside the cabin. 2 moments separated by decades. 2 dogs named Ranger. 2 men who needed someone to stay. As evening approaches, Noah starts down the mountain, leaving Evelyn alone with the dog and the wind. She sits in Daniel's old chair near the doorway, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee. 8 months of grief once made silence feel empty. Now silence feels different. It has birds in it, pine branches, Ranger breathing, her own heartbeat, steady and present. Evelyn reaches into her jacket and removes Thomas Reed's old dog tag. She has attached it to Daniel's, not because their stories are the same, but because one life carried the other forward. Near the door hangs the faded leather collar from the first ranger. Evelyn stands and touches it gently before stepping onto the porch. Ranger raises his head. Ready, boy. He gets to his feet and moves beside her. The sun has dropped behind the western peaks, leaving a ribbon of gold along the horizon. Evelyn rests one hand between Ranger's ears. A breeze passes through the doorway behind them. Daniel's dog tag swings lightly against Thomas Reed's tag. The metal touches the brass plate on the old collar. Clink. Ranger's ears lift. For 1 second, Evelyn remembers the first afternoon on Black Ridge, when that sound stopped them both beneath a cabin filled with questions. She waits for Ranger to turn toward it. He does not. The German shepherd simply closes his eyes beneath her hand, peaceful in the last warmth of the day. Evelyn smiles toward the valley. Some promises are not meant to keep us looking backward. They lead us somewhere, stay beside us until we arrive, and then quietly let us walk on.